Welcome to another episode of Sermon Pod Ministries, where we uncover the timeless wisdom of the Bible, one chapter at a time. Today, we're diving into Matthew chapter 15, a powerful chapter that challenges us to examine our hearts, not just our outward actions. From Jesus' confrontation with the Pharisees about traditions versus God's commands, to his compassionate miracles of healing and provision, this chapter reveals what it means to live with authentic faith. At Sermon Pod, our mission is to spread the word and help churches grow by transforming their weekly sermons into premium quality podcasts, reaching millions on platforms like YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Amazon Music, and more. If your church is looking to expand its reach, visit us at sermonpod.com to see how we can help. And for those of you inspired by today's message, you can support our mission by visiting sermonpod.com to make a donation or shop our Bible verse apparel, faith-centered designs that help share God's Word wherever you go. Your support fuels this ministry and helps us bring the gospel to more people. Get ready as we explore Matthew chapter 15, a chapter that invites us to move beyond appearances and embrace a faith rooted in love, humility, and trust in God's power. Let's get started.
Have you ever wondered why we do certain things just because that's how it's always been done? Welcome back to Sermon Pod Ministries. I'm Tom, and with me as always is my amazing co-host Sarah. Today we're diving into Matthew chapter 15, a chapter that challenges us to examine the difference between genuine faith and empty traditions. Sarah, can you give us an overview of what's happening in this powerful chapter?
Thanks, Tom. Matthew 15 is fascinating because it shows Jesus addressing several key issues that are just as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. The chapter begins with a confrontation between Jesus and religious leaders about hand-washing traditions, then moves to a powerful teaching about what truly defiles a person. We also witness two amazing demonstrations of Jesus' compassion: his interaction with a Canaanite woman and the feeding of 4,000 people. It's a chapter packed with lessons about authentic faith versus religious showmanship.
Let's start with that confrontation in the opening verses. In Matthew 15 verses 1 to 2, we see the Pharisees and teachers of the law coming from Jerusalem to question Jesus about his disciples not washing their hands before eating. Now, Sarah, this wasn't about hygiene, was it?
Not at all, Tom. This was about ceremonial washing, a tradition that had been added to God's law. Biblical scholar N.T. Wright points out that these hand-washing rituals had become so elaborate that they were seen as a mark of spiritual devotion. The Pharisees had turned a human tradition into a test of righteousness, which was never God's intention.
And Jesus' response is pretty striking. In verses 3 to 9, he turns the tables on them, calling out how they've used their traditions to actually break God's commands. He specifically mentions their practice of korban. Could you explain what that means, Sarah?
Absolutely. Korban was a traditional practice where people could declare their property or money as dedicated to God, which sounds noble on the surface. However, some were using this as a loophole to avoid their responsibility to care for their aging parents. They'd say, "Sorry, I can't help you, this money is korban," but they'd continue using it for themselves. Jesus exposes this as a direct violation of the command to honor your father and mother.
That's powerful. And in verses 10 to 20, Jesus goes even deeper, addressing the root issue. He makes this profound statement that it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you, but what comes out. This was revolutionary teaching for that time, wasn't it?
Absolutely revolutionary, Tom. Dr. Craig Keener, in his commentary, notes that this teaching challenged the entire system of ceremonial cleanliness that had developed. Jesus is saying that spiritual purity isn't about external rituals, but about the condition of our hearts. When he lists things like evil thoughts, murder, adultery, and false testimony in verses 19 and 20, he's showing that true defilement comes from within.
Then we come to this amazing encounter with the Canaanite woman in verses 21 to 28. At first glance, Jesus' response to her seems harsh, but there's so much more happening here. What's your take on this, Sarah?
This is one of my favorite passages, Tom. Here's a Gentile woman coming from a people group historically at odds with Israel, showing remarkable faith. Jesus' initial silence and seemingly harsh words actually set the stage for showcasing her incredible persistence and faith. When he says in verse 28, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish," he's not just healing her daughter, he's breaking down cultural and racial barriers.
And historically, this was a huge deal. The Jewish people of that time generally avoided interaction with Canaanites, right?
Exactly. Biblical historian Joachim Jeremias notes that the tension between Jews and Canaanites went back centuries. This interaction would have shocked Jesus' disciples and the original readers of Matthew's Gospel. It beautifully foreshadows the Gospel's extension to all nations.
Then we see another amazing miracle in verses 29 to 31, where Jesus heals many people, followed by the feeding of 4,000 people in verses 32 to 39. Sarah, many people confuse this with the feeding of the 5,000. What are some key differences?
This is actually a distinct event, Tom. While both show Jesus' compassion and power, this miracle likely took place in Gentile territory, based on the geographical context. The Greek word used for baskets here is different from the earlier miracle, and there are different numbers of people and leftovers. This suggests Jesus was demonstrating that his provision was for both Jews and Gentiles.
What strikes me is Jesus' motivation in verse 32. He says, "I have compassion for the crowd because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat."
It really does, Tom. The word used for compassion here, splagchnisomai in Greek, literally refers to a gut-level feeling. It's the same deep emotion Jesus felt for the Canaanite woman's daughter. We're seeing that Jesus' ministry isn't just about teaching truth. It's about meeting real human needs with genuine love and concern.
Looking at this chapter as a whole, what would you say are the key takeaways for our listeners today, Sarah?
First, we need to regularly examine our religious practices and make sure we're not prioritizing traditions over genuine obedience to God. Second, true purity is a matter of the heart, not external behavior. And finally, Jesus' compassion extends to all people, regardless of their background or ethnicity.
Those are profound takeaways. And speaking of compassion, I'm wondering how many of our listeners have felt like that Canaanite woman, perhaps feeling unworthy or like an outsider, but still desperately needing Jesus' help.
That's such a relevant question, Tom. Her story shows us that persistence in faith, even when things seem discouraging, can lead to breakthrough. And Jesus' response to her reminds us that genuine faith transcends all human barriers.
Well, family, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this powerful chapter. Connect with us on Facebook or YouTube by searching for Sermon Pod Ministries. What traditions might you need to examine in your own life? Have you ever felt like an outsider in your faith journey? Share your stories with us.
And don't forget to join us in our next episode as we dive into Matthew chapter 16, where we'll explore one of the most pivotal questions ever asked. Who do you say that I am? You won't want to miss it.
Let me leave you with this quote from Charles Spurgeon. "It is not the vessel outside that needs washing, but the heart inside that needs cleansing." Until next time, family, remember that true faith always starts in the heart.
What an incredible journey through Matthew chapter 15. From Jesus' powerful teachings on the heart over tradition to his compassionate miracles of healing and feeding thousands, this chapter reminds us of the boundless grace and love of God. We hope today's episode has deepened your understanding and inspired you to live with authentic faith. But the journey doesn't end here. In our next episode, we'll dive into Matthew chapter 16, where Jesus challenges his disciples with a pivotal question: Who do you say I am? Join us as we uncover the profound truths about identity, faith, and the foundation of the church. You won't want to miss this transformational episode. At Sermon Pod Ministries, our mission is to spread the word and help churches grow by converting weekly sermons into premium quality podcasts, making them accessible to millions on platforms like YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Amazon Music, and more. If your church is ready to expand its reach, visit us at sermonpod.com to learn how we can help. You can also support our mission by visiting sermonpod.com to make a donation or shop our Bible verse apparel, faith-centered designs that allow you to share God's Word in style. Every contribution helps us continue bringing the gospel to listeners worldwide. We'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media at Sermon Podcast. Share your thoughts, ask questions, or let us know how this episode impacted you. Your engagement helps us grow a community of faith and understanding. Until next time, may your heart remain focused on God's love and your faith firmly rooted in His truth. Stay blessed, and we'll see you in the next episode of Sermon Pod Ministries.